The Palace of Versailles is a magical site where art and nature coexist in perfect harmony. But is that it? No, the definition of cleanliness would be one thing that Palace did not have. We now have antibacterial soaps and sprays, showers and bathtubs in some homes, and washing machines that handle the laundry for us. If you consider the 17th century in that light, you might be relieved that you can't actually smell it. It smelled bad, and it was dirty by our standards of cleanliness. So, want to know the worst filthy times of the Palace of Versailles? Then stay with us till the very end. When you think of Versailles, you probably think of the giant golden palace and the vast gardens, not of dirt. Thousands of people went to the court every day, and up to 5,000 people went where there was a big party or reception. There were times when there was only one chance all year to clean Versailles, and this was usually when the court went to Fontainebleau. When a lot of people go to a place, not only does it get dirty, but it also starts to smell bad. The smell of the land that Versailles was built on made it smell. Some parts of the old marchland smelled pretty bad, especially in the summer when the smell of sweat from the courtiers and their clothes mixed with the scent of the land. People did take baths back then, despite what most people think, but not as often as we do now. People thought bathing, especially in warm water, was terrible for your health. People knew back then what we know now, that warm water opens the pores of the skin. Since most of their water was not as clean as ours, they thought that when the pores were open, all kinds of diseases could get into the body through the skin and cause death. People usually thought that moving water was safer than still water, and that the longer water stood still, the more dangerous it became. During the warm months, people often took baths in rivers and dressed for the occasion. However, people took fewer baths in tubs. Not only because of the pores, but also because a warm bath was a luxury that not everyone could afford. Clean water had to be fetched, heated, and carried through endless corridors to a heavy metal tub covered with linen so that the bather wouldn't burn their behind on the hot metal. Soap was expensive, and so were the oils added to the water to make it smell nice. Overall, it was a big job that took a lot of people to do. People also usually took baths with others, and Louis XIV is the best example. Yes, he did wash more than 3 times. The Sun King had an entire bathing apartment built on the ground floor of Versailles. It even had running water, but the best part was a giant marble tub where he and Madame de Montespan spent many happy hours together. This apartment also had a few smaller tubs that Louis could use to take a bath with a friend before resting in the large closed-off room. When getting out of bed, people usually washed their hands and faces and then rubbed the rest of their bodies to clean them quickly. Some people used a wet cloth, some liked to be rubbed down with perfumes, and others used alcohol, which was thought to be the safest. Alcohol-soaked clothes were used every day to rub Louis XIV's face. Louis wasn't a big fan of perfumes and liked the alcohol wash better. He once told Madame de Montespan that aromas gave him headaches, but that might have been more of a personal thing since they were arguing in a closed carriage. He might have meant something else by saying, "Your perfume gives me a headache." The rubbing down was part of the toilette, getting up and dressed. Depending on the person's rank, this was done more or less in public. A princess would get ready for the day while getting a lot of visitors, just like during the Liver of the King. Just like now, some people are more careful about their appearance than others. Louis XIV may have been picky about it, but the Princesse de Conde, who was married to Le Grand Conde, was said to have a strong smell coming from her armpits. People thought that this quick wash in the morning was enough because they didn't know that washing and water were the only things that kept people clean. It was cotton. People used linen for underwear and bed sheets because they thought it would soak up dirt and smells. So the sheets had to be changed daily, just like the underwear. Louis XIV and many other noblemen changed their linen shirts several times daily. It wasn't just to stay clean, it was also a way to show off how rich someone was. The more prosperous and attractive a man was, the more often he changed his shirt, and the whiter those shirts were. People in the 17th century thought that people with nice teeth were also attractive. To keep their teeth in good shape, they used different powders to rub on their teeth. Those powders could be made of almost anything, from dried and crushed herbs to sage powder or even ash. The courtiers also had a variety of mouthwashes to choose from. Some were made of vinegar or wine, while others were made of honey and other sweet things. It was less than the toothbrushes and toothpaste we have now, and some people were also pickier about how they used it. When Louis XIV married Marie-Therese, she had already had pretty bad teeth and loved chocolate and anything else sweet. Back then, people didn't know that precious things aren't good for your teeth. Madame de Montespan had many outfits to choose from, but a lady with less status would only have a few, which she would change by adding shawls, lace, brooches, or pearls. No matter how many or how few clothes there were, it was hard to keep them clean. Court clothes had to be made from specific fabrics, and the state robes, worn to big parties or receptions, cost more than some nobles made in a year. In some cases, it was almost impossible to wash these fabrics. Stains could be rubbed out with care, but that was about it. A state robe was hung in a breeze to make it smell better. If you have more than one of these, you can let one enjoy the breeze while you wear the other. However, because they were so expensive, most less wealthy nobles only had one. People wore those jewel-encrusted outfits several times a year, and when there was a big party, they wore them for several days in a row. After a while, they started to smell bad. The problem wasn't just with the state robes, it was also with the clothes the courtiers wore daily. Even though they weren't suitable for the balls, they were still made of expensive materials and had gems. The cesspools were another source of bad smells. The courtiers had chamber pots in their rooms, which they used to do daily business. There were a few more things for the royal family to enjoy. Their apartments had a small room where a kind of toilet chair was kept. This room was sometimes also used to store linens or candles. The seat had a hole where the chamber pot could be put on the floor or attached to the chair. These rooms are called garde-robes on the floor plans, but they were also called cabinets d'affaires. Today, this kind of business is done privately. Still, the courtiers of Versailles did not care much about privacy in this area. Some people got visitors while on the toilet or went on it with others. Only Louis XIV's closest family members were allowed in his cabinet d'affaires. During his reign, Versailles had about 274 of these toilet chairs. It wasn't hard to run the business, it was hard to get rid of it. The chamber pots had to be carried through the stinky chateau to the closest sewage pit. Since that was a lot of work, the cans were often thrown out the windows. 2 servants worked for Louis XIV. Their jobs were to clean his pot and give him the cloth. There were also public toilets in Versailles, but there were far too few for how many people needed them. The public restrooms were under the stairs, so the airflow from people walking by would keep the bad smells away. It did not work. Some public toilets were in terrible shape and others were often overflowed. The contents would have leaked into the walls and floors if it was the second one. This happened a lot in one of the public bathrooms. So often people who lived in nearby apartments had to leave their rooms because the mess had soaked through the walls. The perfume was used to mask the smells of the courtiers, their clothes, and the leaky toilets. Not always did perfumes make things better. The smell of different perfumes, some of which smelled bad on their own, mixed with the smell of the dirty air to make a smell that was hard to stand. To stop this from happening again, courtiers carried around little bags with beautiful embroidery that were filled with fragrant herbs or flower petals. There were vases with potpourri in the apartments and public rooms. So with all the things mentioned, what did Versailles smell like? Old water from the many fountains, reservoirs, tubs, and basins was emptied into the small courtyards. All in all, not very pleasant.